TDX PVP has been great so far. It's been a pretty unique experience and... okay, let me address the elephant in the room. How does this have anything to do with TDX PVP? Well, believe it or not, these two games actually have a lot more in common than you would think. And from my experience playing Tier, I believe there is a lot to take from this game that can be applied to TDX PVP to make it even better. But first, for some context, let me introduce you to Tier. Tier is a strategy-based multiplayer tank shooter. Each match contains 2 teams of 8 players, and the goal is very simple: capture the enemy base, or destroy all enemy tanks, which is the direction most matches tend to go, because in Tier, once you die, you cannot respawn. However, unlike most tank shooters like World of Tanks, Tier doesn't strive to be realistic, because your tank can do this. Every tank in Tier can use energy to activate its own unique ability, as well as each tank having its own tech tree, which allows for further customization on how you play. Finally, Tier has a unique asymmetric spotting mechanic that works similarly to data link in real life. Once you've been spotted, the entire enemy team can see you, even through walls, while being unspotted makes you essentially invisible, as you can't see unspotted tanks even if they would technically be visible. That has been a very brief introduction to Tier. There's obviously a lot more nuance to the game, but I want to move on because there's genuinely a lot TDX can utilize from Tier to improve PvP even more. While these two games are very different on paper, if we look more closely at the details, a lot of similarities start showing up. The biggest one is the emphasis on macro skills over micro skills. In TDX, being able to sell and replace / upgrade towers fast is certainly a very beneficial micro skill. But macro skills like knowing tower cost efficiencies, wave layouts, and economy, and what the most effective enemy to send during specific points of the game far outweigh being good at tower micro. The same thing can be seen in Tier. Having good aim and movement definitely helps, but what really wins games is predicting where unspotted tanks are, tracking resources like energy, HP, and ability cooldowns, knowing when to engage or to fall back, and how to effectively play into your teammates, all of which are macro skills. There are many more examples, but with that in mind, how can certain aspects from Tier be used to improve PvP? And more importantly, what does this... Hello sir! Hello sir! have to do with anything? First off, quality of life, or more specifically, the player experience. Now, TDX is always working on these things. For example, recently they let you auto-send enemies, which is an absolute godsend, no pun intended. And I'm certain the development team is continuing to work on making PvP a better player experience. But the real question is, to what point? What do I mean by this? Well, let's take a look at Tier. Like TDX, quality of life is also a very high priority for the Tier developers. And one of the most influential quality of life features in Tier is the armor viewer. You see, in most tank shooters, knowing whether your shot will penetrate or bounce is an extremely important skill to have, as this will quite literally dictate the outcome of an engagement. However, in Tier, this is trivialized with the armor viewer, as simply aiming down sights will let you know where you need to shoot for a penetration, as well as highlighting various weak points that allow you to deal extra damage or temporarily disable specific capabilities of an enemy tank. Now, whether or not this makes Tier more competitive or not is certainly a very interesting debate that I will not be covering, but how this can be applied to TDX PVP is what I will be talking about. You see, there is a lot of nuance to quality of life features. Things like auto-sending enemies is a very basic feature that I think almost everyone enjoys having in the game. But as these quality of life features become more impactful, they will begin fundamentally changing how TDX PVP plays, just like how the armor viewer in Tier changes how the game plays compared to more traditional tank shooters. But what does this look like in TDX? I'll start listing off quality of life suggestions that would become increasingly more influential. and you will quickly see how these features can radically change PvP. An economy timer that shows when you'll receive your money. The ability to cancel queued enemy sends. Enemy sends will also show their cost and economy efficiencies mid-match. Tower upgrades showing their cost efficiencies. While placing towers, the map will highlight the most optimal spots to utilize a tower's range. Towers automatically target the most optimal enemy. Towers automatically selling themselves before they die. Towers upgrading themselves in the most optimal way to prevent a leak. As you can see, on the extreme side, quality of life features have extreme impacts on the game. While it seems very simple the way I put it, it's important not to overlook these basic factors, especially when there really isn't a right answer to how impactful quality of life should have on the gameplay. It's obvious that TDX will want to strike a balance between the two extremes, but where exactly that balance is something that should be seriously considered. Secondly, barrier to entry. This is something TDX PVP kind of struggles with, as I was having trouble playing the new PvP mode with some of my friends who are newer to TDX, as they simply didn't have the gold or levels to unlock good PvP towers such as Ghost and Machine Gunner. While I understand that PvP is reserved for more experienced players, I think that making this game mode more accessible to a wider audience won't do the game any harm. While I can't make a direct one-for-one connection to Tier due to the inherent differences between the two games, I still think there is something to learn here. You see, like TDX, Tier also has quite a bit of progression, as you don't start out with all the tanks, and you must also level up each individual tank to unlock its full capabilities. However, the difference between TDX and Tier is how fast you can get meaningful progression. While TDX is already very lenient on how much grind is required compared to other tower defense games, Tier takes it to the next level. Within an hour of playing, I had already maxed out my first tank, and within 12 hours, I had already unlocked every tank in the game, except for this one tank that was really expensive for some reason. My point is that it took very little time for me to have a small roster of competitively viable tanks, whereas in TDX, a competitive PvP loadout may include some really expensive late game towers like the Refractor and War Machine, which can take weeks to unlock if you aren't hardcore grinding. This is why, to lower the barrier to entry for TDX PvP, I suggest adding PvP tower loadouts and a PvP tower shop. The PvP loadouts can only be used for PvP, not normal survival matches, and the towers in the PvP shop will be sold at a significant discount, and ideally also have reduced or no level unlock restrictions. Towers bought in the PvP shop will only be equipable in PvP loadouts, restricting them from being used in survival. This way, newer and existing players will be able to access a lot more towers for PvP, making the game mode more competitively accessible to a wider audience, while still giving an incentive for these players to buy the towers normally so they can be used for survival. Additionally, purchasing a tower in the PvP shop will also discount said tower in the normal shop, so that the total cost of obtaining every tower for both PvP and survival is the same as it is right now. And finally, purchasing a tower for the full price normally will also unlock its PvP variant automatically.
Let's talk about car bombing.
In Tier. But to actually understand how this can help TDX PvP, we need to understand how car bombing in Tier works. Meet the Fuse, a light tank with a very unique ability, Glom Missile. Now, the intended use for these missiles is to stick them onto enemies and detonate them by shooting the missiles with a shell. However, someone found out that not only could you stick these missiles onto allies, but strategically placing a missile on an allied fuse's missile launcher will cause the next ability used to automatically detonate all missiles in a nearby radius. Pair this with an energy speed hybrid build that allowed for 4 ability usages at the start of the match, and you get yourself a self-guided bomb capable of instantly vaporizing most light and medium tanks. And since Glom missile explosions ignore armor, this strategy can also severely weaken heavy tanks. Now, why does this matter for TDX PvP? Well, for one, silly strategies like this are abundant in Tier. Like, holy crap, I didn't know this game had a space program. But the one thing all these strategies have in common is that they require teamwork. In fact, the number one factor that kept me coming back to play tier again and again was being able to experiment with different team-based strategies with a friend. A lot of you can probably see where this is heading now, because currently TDX PVP is limited to 1v1 only. And there are many valid reasons why 2v2, 3v3, or even 4v4 isn't implemented yet, such as balancing and performance. But I seriously urge this feature to be prioritized because it would significantly improve how fun PvP is. Humans are social creatures by nature. Adding team-based PvP is literally exploiting 300,000 years worth of evolution. So I guess the entire video is literally just, please add team-based PvP!